Welcome everybody who's signing on. We'll get started around noon. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to be talking about turf lawn care with Dr. Patton from Purdue. So we're just going to give everyone a chance to get logged on, and we'll probably get started a few minutes after noon.
Hello there.
Hello. We'll let everyone get a chance to get logged on here. As we're kind of letting folks in, I am going to put a poll up. If you guys could answer that, we greatly appreciate that. As mentioned in classes before, these are this is how we record to Purdue for our programs. So we appreciate that. If you can get that filled out for us. I think it's showing up. Yeah, people are answering. Perfect.
Are the previous hot topics recorded?
Yep. So did you receive the email today from, it would have been from Courtney Schmidt. She sent our first email out around 9:23. If you click on that email, it had the Zoom link for today, but then it also has the link to our YouTube page. That's the page that has the 3 videos we've done so far. So I'm gonna click on that real.
Okay, no, I haven't seen that email yet.
Okay. Well, and if not, feel free to put your email. There you go. In the chat box link, Jessica has put in the link to that YouTube.
Okay.
That'll take you to the channel, and then you'll be able to go straight to it.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and by the way, the email that she's got listed needs to have .org after it.
Okay, could you
Send her question.
gotcha. Could you throw your email into the chat box real quick? We'll save that and get that on the register.
Okie dokie.
Thank you.
Chat box. Let's see. Find the chat box there. Is it? Oh.
So yeah, as folks are signing on, we just asked that you guys, we do have a large crowd today. So if you could keep your microphone muted for us, that would be great, because we do get some interference once in a while. We do have, I think the poll is still up. If you guys could answer that poll question for us, that helps with our demographics to get those all squared away. I have emailed our speaker. He should be with us in a minute. But we are going to cover turf today. Just some general announcements. That link that goes to YouTube, that's going to have our extension hot topics for organic and composting, which was January. Sustainable garden planning, that was our February, and then March disease and diseases in disguise. That was our Purdue pesticide and Purdue pesticide diagnostic lab. So those are the three we've got so far. Anyone who's Wabash master gardeners or master gardeners in general, make sure you put this down for your education. This is one of those times where you just have to sit and join us, and then we'll that should be counted towards your education hours. So we'll give our speaker a few more minutes to get on. He had another excuse me, engagement before this, so we'll give him some time. I guess I can do some announcements too, just to kind of keep things moving. Our next live programming is going to be on May the 18th. That one's going to be on soil. So we're covering turf today, specific problems, and then we've got a soil specialist, Eileen Kladivko. She's also on campus with Purdue. So she will talk about that. I don't know if there's any specific things that you guys want to hear about. I did pick, there are a few issues that I have discussed with our speaker today. So we'll cover things like Nimblewell and a couple other issues, but I do think that it does work best if you guys have questions about lawn care. If you could throw that in the chat box. But one thing to kind of help us out while we're waiting here, if you guys could throw your county that you're from in the chat box. I know our West Lafayette location, that's going to be, kind of central Indiana. I'm more the northeastern section of the state. But if you guys could put your counties down, that would help us greatly. And if you're not in Indiana, feel free to put where that is, because that'll kind of help us gauge where it's at. Sometimes when you give these turf talks, you got to be careful because you want to make sure you're covering all your bases. So if we've got folks from Evansville and Fort Wayne, there's going to be a little bit different things to look at.
So if I may for a moment go back to next month's topic. Eileen has just actually recently finished up a 30-year study on drainage. And so I've kind of asked her to talk a little bit more about that and also anything that she would want to talk about as well, just to kind of give you a sneak peek. So.
Thanks, Matthias. I am going to, Matthias, do you mind putting on some background music? We're going to just give it a few more minutes here. I'm going to make a few phone calls. All right, so we'll get started here in a minute. Apologize for the little delay, but we'll get started here soon. Looks like we had some Zoom issues, so we'll try to get that squared away. We've used these things for so long, and every once in a while they like to pick up on us. So this is the Zoom link that should have been in the email that was sent out this morning. Glad you guys could all make it. But yeah, appreciate everyone who has been putting their counties in the chat box there. And I guess also while we're waiting, if you guys want to put, so I've worked with our speaker, Dr. Patton, for quite a while. He is the state specialist for lawn care. He does a lot of the weed ID issues, things like that. So while we're waiting, if you guys know what weeds you have in your lawn, if you could put some of those in the chat box. And that way, we could try to, because what he does a lot of the time too, is he will do surveys of the state. And so each of the weeds that, people kind of survey, that's something where he will actually cater those talks to that. So for instance, everyone's going to have ground ivy. So if you ever put ground ivy in there, but if we have a wet season, then we get a lot of calls about things like yellow nutsedge. So being aware of, what sort of weather we're having, what sort of conditions. I do see people putting things like plantains down. So that's going to be either broadleaf or buckhorn plantain. Those are going to show up a lot of times when we have our drought stress issues. So any sort of weeds or lawn issues you have, I'd say throw those in the chat box as well. And then, like I said, we'll get it started as soon as we can. Violets, that's a good one. And I apologize, ground ivy and creeping Charlie, those are the same weed. The other thing a lot of creeping Charlie, hairy bittercress, dandelions. Yep. I am curious with the dandelion flush, because we had a few days of warm temperatures. We had a few warm days, but then it just kind of, well, now we're warm again, but it's supposed to cool off. So who knows what's going to happen. It does make it difficult when we're talking about crabgrass. I might open up here. Let's see. I'm going to see if I can find one of my PowerPoints, because while we're waiting here, I'm going to show some of our resources that we use. I would suggest, it was on and I can share the screen. I'm actually going to do that right now. So I'm just going to get to, well, here is our, this is our webpage. Well, you can't see it yet. So here's our webpage for the Purdue Extension Area ANR. So these are going to be our videos that we have recorded. So feel free to view those at your leisure. And then if we go to I've got our turf website. Matthias, are you seeing this okay? I always worry about.
Yes, we are.
Okay. So, so our turf grass website, it'll take a minute to load here. They have different turf tips. These are the resources that you guys are going to use down here. My favorite one is this turf grass weeds. It has a snapshot, and this is all free to you guys. It's online. But anything that's printed on this, or published on this page has been researched by the university. It's not something that can just be done willy-nilly. So this is stuff that Dr. Patton's group has developed over the years. So it has the different, profiles for the weeds. I'm going to say, please be careful when you go down this rabbit hole, just because once you start identifying the weeds, you're going to start seeing them everywhere. So if you have one in particular, it's a great resource for that to use, especially for the hard to control weeds. I think we're going to talk about ground ivy today already, or a little bit. Let's see, I'm going to do, well, someone had mentioned purple dead nettle, I think. This is one you're probably seeing right now. It's a winter annual. So it's going to be so what happens for these profiles, and again, it's a lot of information, but it'll have the biology, because one thing that we're concerned about in turfgrass is the life cycle. If you know the weed's life cycle, you're going to be able to figure out if you so choose to use an herbicide, you're going to be able to figure out when is the best time to use that. We need to be good stewards of the land when we're using our herbicides. So knowing the right time, the right weed, we basically want to make sure we're using the least amount of herbicide to get the best result. So those winter annuals are best going to be applied in the late fall, and you can apply them in the spring as well. And then it'll go through identification. So purple dead nettle is a winter annual. And then it tells, you know, when it germinates. It does overwinter just fine. So the reason these things are all poking up right now is because they had already germinated back in the fall or early spring. So I know we're kind of getting into the end of April. So these guys are a little more noticeable in March when we're still getting those frosts and warmer temperatures. But it's got that rough leaf, kind of a triangle shape, the nice purple flowers. Some people want to keep these in their lawns, and that is okay if they want to keep them for bees or whatever. Just make sure, you know, if you do want to get rid of them, there are different things you can do in order to, you know, make sure they're eradicated. A lot of times they're not an issue. Where you will find these is going to be areas that have compaction, usually where the sidewalk comes to a corner and people do not want to, people don't want to actually take the corner. They want to cut across the yard. So compaction is where these will take seed and you'll show, or they'll, you know, be kind of, you know, prevalent. Sides of buildings are another one because they warm up a little bit faster. So, you know, that's another one to think about. Let's see. We do have the square stem here. So it is in the mint family. If you do end up mowing these, they do have a bit of a smell to them. And then it goes into the flower. So purple dead nettle, it does have a petiole. So that just means there is a little stem that connects the leaf. I'm sorry, there's a little stem that connects the leaf to the main trunk or stem there. Sometimes the leaves are purple, sometimes they're green. Just kind of depends on where it is in maturity. And then this is the most important thing, probably the most valuable bit. There are different things that you can do to control that weed in your lawn. And they go through specifically cultural control. Now, these are things you can do that do not involve herbicides. So you're thinking, you know, purple dead nettle occurs in turf and soils that are disturbed during fall when it germinates. So making sure you have a healthy stand in the fall, a healthy stand of turf in the fall, mowing properly, so higher mowing heights. And then irrigation to prevent summer dormancy. That's going to, again, you are trying to make sure that your lawn can outcompete that weed. And so all these things are, you know, procedures you can do to make sure that, again, those seeds are not going to germinate. And then if they can't germinate, then, you know, they'll either, you know, rot or, you know, just be outcompeted. So cultural control, we always sort of advocate for that. Some people really like using herbicides, some people don't. That's just something where I'll go ahead and say, anytime you move away from the cultural controls and you use your chemicals or biologicals, the label is the law. So anytime you do that, make sure you're covering that with your different treatments. And then this, so again, this cultural part, this is, you know, has been researched. A health dense lawn is going to be the best defense against your weeds. That's going to be pretty much the same for all of these. And then let's see, biological control. This is a real hit or miss on those. The biologicals, this one has mentioned iron applications. So I think it's chelated iron, but all you have to do, this is one where you can spray these things, but they don't work all that well. So just be aware of that. It's just the nature of the beast with those. But there are some options out there. And then if you do choose the chemical control, again, labels the law. This is the research where anything containing 2,4-D, dicamba, fluroxypyr, and others will control purple dead nettle. And then it does mention as plants get bigger, herbicides will be less effective at controlling the weed. That's just something we see in general with all of our weed sciences. Whether you're in crops or whether you're, in the field, whatever, or on lawns, the smaller the weed, the easier it is to control with your herbicide. So scouting is a big one, and getting your timing of application is also another one. So Matthias or Jessica, has Dr. Patton hopped on yet?
I have not seen him yet, but I will
Okay.
continue to look for him.
Okay, because we can keep going through this. Again, we're kind of flexible with it, but hopefully he'll jump on here in a sec. Let's see. Where's my chat box? Do we have any common chickweed? Let's go to that one. That's the latest one I see. So I think it's up this way. Common chickweed, not to be confused with mouse-eared chickweed. There we go. I was hoping that was Dr. Penn. So common chickweed, winter annual broadleaf weed. It has those dense patches. One thing we describe about the chickweed is in the lawns, it is going to be able to basically have a crown, if you will, and then it is able to kind of snake through the grass and then spread. And then each of these little white dots are flowers. It is a heavy seed producer, and those seeds will be able to germinate. Typically, they're going to germinate in the fall. However, weeds are going to take advantage of any times that things are working out well. So, but again, for the most part, these are going to be the winter annuals. Here we have a young one in a dormant lawn. Those leaf shapes, you're going to have that pointed leaf on some. Here's that flower, pretty delicate, pretty small. It is daisy-like. It's got the 5 petals. So it looks like there's 10, but really there's only 5. They're just lobed very heavily. Let's see. And then here you have those mats. In one sense, this is a pretty bad infestation here, but if you can find that crown and pull that, you'll be able to take that away. The biggest thing is if you see the white flowers, that means it hasn't seeded yet. And that's one thing you really want to prevent with these annual weeds. Annual weeds, just as a general rule of their biology, they're going to be able to spread those seeds heavily. So if you got it this year and you don't control it, you're more than likely going to have it next year. So it's got that prostrate growth that's going to help it spread. And then this comment here, the presence may indicate moist, poorly drained, or compacted soil. So that's something where we have what we call indicator weeds. Indicator weeds is just a fancy way of saying, if I see this weed, then I probably have this issue. So if you have wet soils or poorly drained or the compacted soils, this is in front of Lilly Hall of Life Sciences at Purdue. So you get a lot of foot traffic through here, maybe not a very well-maintained area. Anytime you're near a building, you are going to be working or having to deal with compaction. Think of your construction. That stuff, they're putting equipment through there. They may be mowing it and then fertilizing it, possibly. But for the most part, anytime you're near a school or structure like that, again, you're going to get a lot of foot traffic around there. So as I mentioned with the purple dead nettle, cultural control is going to be the same thing. Mowing height, fertilization, irrigation to help develop a dense, aggressive turf capable of out controlling the weeds. Here we go. Here's that indicator weed. Measuring the presence might indicate underlying management issues. So if you're seeing an area that's, poorly drained, stuff like that, it might be worth your while to, get a soil test, but also figure out if you have compaction and you need to do something like aeration. So here we go, cultivation or aeration, which if you guys have seen, football fields or some of those highly maintained areas, that's where they're pulling cores. And then it ends up looking like you have it looks like you had a herd of goose come through and it looks like goose poop, but instead of poop, it is the soil cores. So that'll help relieve the compaction. We do get a lot of questions about, when can I aerate? But that is something that, rule of thumb, if you're going to aerate it, do it when the turf is most happy. So that's going to be in the springtime, about this time when we've got good moisture in the soil. The plants will not be stressed out. So spring is a good time, and then fall is a good time. We do not suggest aerating during the high summer, just because that's going to be something that, the turf might not, it might not be too happy if you do that. So try to avoid that during the summer. And then let's, what else? Here again, you see that iron, a product containing iron if you want to use a biological control. Iron, though, when you put that on the plants, it is only going to burn the leaves. And I say burn the leaves, it removes their protective coating, so it's a glorified sunburn on those. However, a lot of these weeds have reserves of sugar in their roots. And so what's going to happen is, yes, those leaves will, eventually get necrotic and die off, but the plant should be able to, or might recover, as opposed to a herbicide that actually moves through the plant into the growing areas that'll control that weed completely. So just be aware of that. And then here we have the three-way herbicides, again, that can control those. In the cool season turf, warm season turf, you might have to use a couple other different things. When you guys were mentioning your counties, I think we're dealing with mostly central, northern Indiana folks, but anyone who views this later on, just be aware that, there are different things to use if you have the warm season grasses. So cool season grasses, we've got things like cool season grasses. If any of you have taken the Master Gardener course, cool season, we usually think of Kentucky bluegrass, turf type tall fescue, fine leaf fescue, and our perennial ryegrasses. Those are going to be the most common, and then they have different cultivar names as well. So yeah, that's something. I apologize. I'm checking chat boxes and emails to see if our speaker has jumped on yet. So let's see. Oh, I did see one about using the plant ID camera that described as red dead nettle as opposed to purple dead nettle. I have no idea if there are, if that is a difference, but so some of the resources we use, I do like those picture, I do like those ID photo, I apologize, I can't think of the word, the identification tools. We were actually talking about, there's an app called the Merlin app for birds, and that's what I use for birds, because I'm not very I'm not very well versed in those, but I am well versed in weeds. So using those apps are a great tool to start with. However, I like a resource that has an author behind it, or a some sort of source. So I'm looking up. I'm gonna stop sharing.
So
my
while
screen.
you're doing that, Jeff, I'll jump
Yeah.
in on the apps
Thank
here.
you.
The apps, a couple apps that I use regularly to help me identify weeds, animals, bugs, different things like that. The first one is an app called iNaturalist. iNaturalist is where you can take a picture of it and it'll search through databases for similar things, and it'll actually give you, it'll narrow down the things that it could be. Couple times I've had it be 100% be what it is, but most of the time you're going to get it pretty close, where you can kind of research 2 or 3 things instead of a whole list of things. And then the other one is actually, I think, pulling off the same database, but it's called Seek by iNaturalist. And Seek by iNaturalist will actually allow you to open up your camera and kind of move around a little bit more inside, and more of a video camera type thing, where you can get different angles of that plant or bug or whatever that you're trying to identify. And with this one, I actually like it a little bit more personally, but feel free to use anything that you are comfortable with. But for me personally, the Seek by iNaturalist, I really, really like, because it'll go through, there's like 7 dots at the top. And as you go through and it starts to get more and more information about that plant, it'll give you like 6 or 7 dots. So you get you in the same family, and then you kind of move it around a little bit more, get a little bit better picture of it. It'll actually then have the opportunity to positively identify it. Now, sometimes you still kind of miss a little bit on that one, but most of the time it's going to be a little bit more accurate than just a single picture for me personally. But like I said, there's a bunch of different apps out there. Those are 2 that I use. The Google Lens, I've not had much experience with, but there are several educators out there that do use that. and have a lot of good luck with it as well. So there's a lot of technology out there that can definitely help you identify some of these other things that that can help you. So, and it looks like Jeff is on the phone there, so probably hoping to get our speaker here. So while we're kind of waiting here, does anybody have any other questions on turf or bugs or anything like that? Feel free to pop them in the chat, and or feel free, if you're comfortable, to go ahead and unmute.
Yeah, we're gonna just pull an audible, and this is gonna be kind of an open forum. I'm not sure if Dr. Patton got pulled away from something, but I think let's cover ground ivy, because this is one of everyone's favorites. Matthias, is the screen okay? I can pull up a PowerPoint, but I'm a little nervous that once I do that, my Zoom will shut down. So let's go through a few more weeds. I'll show you a few resources. If we get a hold of our speaker, do not worry. We'll put this video out. I apologize, I was kind of tripping up there a little, but we'll go through some weeds. Any questions you guys have? We've got, about a half hour left or so, and I can stay on a little bit longer. No worries there, but we'll just kind of go through some things that we think are important for turf grass. And then if we can get the speaker, we might have an extra special session. And so that'll kind of be the same information that we were given, I'm sorry, that we would have given today. But again, we're still kind of covering the same thing as that, but we'll go ahead. I guess I should mention, my background, I worked with Dr. Patton for about 5 years in the Turf Research Center. So he trained me. So you're kind of getting the version, I wouldn't say 2.0, but some of his work. Ground ivy, the leaves, it's got these ridged edges, densely grown leaves. Here we've got some that has a little bit of burn on it. It does have a petiole. Square stem means it's in the mint family. This is another one where once you have the dense stands of this and you mow over it, it's going to have a smell to it. And then you can see these stolons running through. We often do not see the seedlings or the younger plants, but you can see the stolon running right through here. Stolons are above ground, rhizomes are beneath. This is what makes it a very successful weed. It does not, this part of the plant, unless you put down a systemic herbicide like 2,4-D or triclopyr or fluroxypyr or whatever, that herbicide does need to be able to travel through the different avenues in the plant to make sure it gets to all the cells. But this is a seedling here. Here's that purple flower. I'm in the Wabash area, so kind of northeastern part of the state. This is blooming right now. It can be a source of pollination for bees, but it is a weed, so it's not necessarily their favorite, but it is a source for them. Here we go again with the cultural control. But this one, because ground ivy is a hard to control weed, it has the aggressive growth in its establishment. Sometimes our dense turf grass stands are not enough. You might have to throw in some nitrogen fertilization in order to beef up the grass. The hardest part is when it gets established, it does a really good job of just creeping, as the name implies, creeping Charlie. So you will have to come through. This is the buzzword or the big takeaway: repeated applications of your 2-way or 3-way mixtures. You can get control using things like Trimec, or some of those common 3-way herbicides that have the 2,4-D, the dicamba, and then the MCPP, MCPA. But if you spray it in the spring, expect to spray it in the fall. I've even known some people who, by following the labels, you can spray a certain amount, but they have limits on how much you can apply to a certain area. So just be aware of that. And then some of them also have timing issues of when you can should actually spray that. I know we're talking in April about this for any of the perennial, and this is a perennial weeds in the lawn. You can spray in the spring, but the best time to get the most bang for your buck is going to be in the fall, because with the biology of how these plants work right now, they're pushing all their energy up to the flowers and for growing. So it's a net movement up. from the ground versus in the fall, they're actually pulling that nutrients down. So if you get that herbicide on the plant, it is actually going to pull down and get into those stolons, into those roots, and you'll get better control. So again, using the plant's biology to kind of make our applications more, more successful. Because again, we want to get the most control with the least amount of product. I will say with ground ivy though, this is something where you're really going to have to throw the kitchen sink at it, because if you miss one plant, it's going to be able to spread if it's got a good stand. Let's see.
All right. So Nicholas is asking, do you have any recommendations for organic fertilizers for the cool season grasses?
Yes. So we're just going to take a field trip through the website, a virtual field trip, if you will. Because it looks like we've got some other good things. Poor drainage for soil strategies. That one, soil tests are good, but then aerification is another one. Soil test to see what you're working with, and then also figuring out, what your what if you need to do any sort of compaction control with that. Okay, I'm sorry, Matthias, what were we talking about? Organic fertilizers for cool season lawns.
Yes.
Where can I go for that one? So resources, if you go to here's the list. That's what I want to see. Oh, and while that's loading, the question about the red dead nettle versus purple dead nettle, I'm looking at a book. This is Weeds of the Northeast. Red dead nettle is also known as purple dead nettle. So they're the same thing. That's why I like the books, is because sometimes they'll give you information about different synonyms that you can use. So there's that. Let's see. You wanted there we go, maintaining. So these are, again, this is on the website. Here we have fertilizing an established lawn. I'm trying to see if there is an organic session. I'm going to write that down because I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, and we can send out some recommendations for that, because I do know there are things like milorganite, which is, I think that's right. There are some products that are cleaned and processed poultry manure, and that's a good one. The only problem with that is you do have to put quite a bit on your lawns, and it is one of those that does need to be reapplied quite often, but there are options out there. So let's see if this sucker pulls up. All right, so not pulling up anything again. Well, that'll be one of our articles that we will post on our post email for this program. We'll get that in there. I think there was another question, and this is a good one to talk about. Sedges. Yellow nut sedge is the one I'm mostly concerned about in my area. Sedges are one of those things that they are perennials. The ones that we typically have are yellow nut sedge and purple nut sedge. Purple nut sedge tends to be more south, but we're going to go through here. And the problem with sedges is the longer I've talked about turf, and then we're kind of looking at weed management in general, there are no silver bullets. As much as we would like to have that option, some of these weeds you can control the majority of them with one application, but for others they are applications that need to be repeated. Sedges are definitely one of those things, so it should be here somewhere. There you go, last one. So yellow nut sedge, unlike our creeping Charlie, the yellow nut sedge is going to have a triangle shaped stem. I think there's a picture of that here somewhere. Yep, here you go. So ground ivy is going to have the square stem. This is a cross section of the nut sedge, so that's the triangle stem. You can see how it grows in the 3-leaf arrangement. These are all close-ups of the plant. If you're looking at this on a sunny day, the best thing to do is look kind of at an angle. and make sure and see if it's a waxy leaf. So these things are kind of shiny, or at least that's how I would describe it, as shiny or waxy. The other thing that happens is around July 4th, when we want our lawns to look good for the holiday, these guys will start taking off. They love it when the soil temperature is elevated, and they will just put a lot of their energy towards growing above the grass. So they're very unsightly. They do work, or they do grow well in compacted soils. Here, these are the leaf tips for those. So purple nut sedge is a little broader versus the yellow nut sedge has more of a sharper tip to it. They both spread like wildfire. So it's, if you know that information, great. If not, no biggie. Here you can kind of see that waxy portion of it here with that sunlight pulling on it. And then the rhizomes. This is what makes it an excellent weed, is the fact that these rhizomes go underneath the ground. And then what happens is at the end of the rhizome, so they're able to grow these nutlets. And that's just a fancy way of saying it can plant its own seeds. This is why it spreads. This is why if you do have a patch of it, you really need to make sure you're seeing where it's at and continuing to monitor that. Because after you do an application and let's say you get good control, you need to make sure that you keep an eye on that, because these tubers, they can last in the soil from 1 year to maybe 5 years. So don't ever throw that product away they use to control your sedges, because you probably need it. Again, one of my brothers had a pretty small infestation of this. It was only about the size of maybe a basketball. But I said, hey, get the bottle of spray, put it down. It's usually a couple times a year you need to put that down when it's growing real nicely in June-ish, maybe later in the season. But you're gonna have to hit it at least twice a year just to kind of, one, kick it down, and two, kick it while it is down, because you want to make sure you get all these leaves taken care of, but then you also want to make sure they're not producing any of the nutlets. And then here's the flower. We don't see that very often. This is a stand. Here we go, that waxy, shiny appearance. This image right here, you can see, one, we do not have a dense soil right here. So that has opened up the way for this nut sedge to get established. So this is a big patch of nut sedge. And then we got another patch back here. And then again, we're talking about cultural control. I don't care if I sound like a broken record. Best method is to have that dense, aggressive turf. And then chemical control. I don't want to read through all this, but they do have different things that you can use. And there are some publications. Usually it has the name sedge in it, sedge hammer or something like that, but they do have specific publications on those. My hope would be that you don't have to worry about this. Golf course folks have an issue with it. But for the most part, it's one of those where if you have it, you know it. If you don't, no worries. Let's see. I have a question here. How to get rid of wild garlic on the lawn? Honestly, I have to do, if you're okay with it, just mow over it. If you mow over it a few times, it'll disappear. Those garlic bulbs are pretty hard to, you can always dig them out, but then you're going to have injury to your lawn. So for the most part, I just say mowing over those, or even if you weed whack them, those are pretty good. This is a good question. Common risks for having a company do lawn spraying. Lawn care operators, first thing you should do, and this is what I try to do. If anyone is applying chemical on your lawn for hire, they really should be licensed. Now, for the turf industry, that license is a 3B, and I give you all permission. If you do hire a lawn care company out, say, are you licensed in the 3B? Because that means they've taken a test, they keep up on their continuing credit hours, and they're getting information. If you have an issue with someone who is spraying your lawn, I'm going to kind of do a bit on extension educators are happy to look at things, take pictures. We are, as the title implies, educators. We are not enforcers. So we cannot, we can come out to your lawn and say, ooh, that doesn't look very good. We can say, hey, maybe let's figure out what's going on. We'll look at abiotic factors like weather, rain amounts, things like that. See if anyone else's lawn is looking goofy. But as far as if you say, hey, the farmer has gone through and sprayed his field. He's killed my lawn. He's killed some of my landscape plants, or, maybe you think the lawn care company did hit some of your tomatoes, whatever. That's where you have to get the state chemist involved, because they're the enforcers of that. And we really, as extension educators, we can guide you to those people, but we are not allowed to say, yes, they did this, no, they didn't do this, or anything like that. Because there's about 50 different things that could have happened. And so we're just not allowed to do that. So, but I think there's risks and benefits to having those people spraying the lawn. But for the most part, they do a great job. I had my neighbor was spraying their lawn in the spring, and I start tomatoes from seed. And so they were outside on the porch there, and 2,4-D is one of those herbicides that is commonly used in turf, but can hurt some of our tomatoes, grapes. It's not dogwood, red buds. So just being aware that, hey, I see someone spraying, and I just went out there politely said, hey, quick question, what are you spraying? And he said, fertilizer, and 2,4-D said, hey, no worries. I just want to make sure I pull my plants in because I don't want to get those injured, just, with safety.
Also, to go along with it, in the chat, I did put a resource from Purdue, Should I Hire a Professional Lawn Care Service? So you might want to take a look at that. And it also covers some of those helpful tips that Jeff covered, like asking for the license and insurance, seeing if they're members of any professional organization or anything like that. So the link for that one is in the chat. So feel free to take a look at that one as well.
And yeah, the drainage thing, the turf strategies for areas with poor drainage. There's a couple things you can do. Aerification is one. It's hard. No grass really likes to have wet feet. And so your Kentucky bluegrasses, which a lot of people plant, they don't do so well in the poorly drained soils. But there are some varieties of tall fescue that could do well. But yeah, usually it's something to do with the soil that you've got to do. Like I said, doing core aerification, trying to get rid of that compaction, and then working to get that soil kind of beefed up, because they have done studies where it's more golf courses, or maybe the areas of more heavily maintained lawns. The longer you have a nice lawn in place, just think of all the roots and the air and the passageways for air and water. Those get developed over time. So as turf grass develops and goes through its life, say 5, 10, 15 years, you're actually putting more organic matter into the soil. So again, getting that right species planted and then slowly building up your soil so that you have those nutrients, and it kind of helps itself. This is a good one. Can weed seeds be transferred from lawn to lawn on mowers used by grass cutting services? You betcha. I was very happy. So I work at my office is located at the Wabash County Courthouse, and they were mowing around before they put their mowers on the trailers. They had their leaf blower, and they were just blowing all the debris off. And I thought it took him 2 or 3 extra minutes to do that, but that's one of the best things. We call that sanitation, machine sanitation. So, I was very happy to see that. And it's as simple as that. And then if you think, you hope that as they're driving down the road, some of that will probably get blown off too. But no, that's definitely a concern with that. What other things do we have? I did promise we were going to talk about Nimble Will. So why don't we cover that one real quick? This one right now, Nimble Will is what you see in your lawn if you have a shady lawn and it looks like it's just a bunch of straw. So I'm going to find that picture real quick. So Nimble Will likes the shade. Nimble will be brown like this for basically the first frost until we get some warmer temperatures. So it's slowly coming back. This is what it looks like right now. This is early growth in the spring. So you've got these ugly looking brown stalks going through here. And then you will have some green going around. You will not see this in the summertime. So if you're okay with seeing this in the late fall, winter, and early spring, if you can live with that, that's what it's going to be. Excuse me. But then here we've got what it looks like, in full bloom. It's a kind of a blue greenish color. It is lighter than some of our cool season grasses. One thing I notice, or the biggest things I look for, I guess, the short pointed leaves. So here you have the stem, and then they jet off at about a 45-degree angle. This picture does a really good job of showing Nimblewill is going to have like 3 or 4 prominent veins on it. So I will actually kind of fold that leaf over my finger and just see, can I see, 7 or 8 veins? That if that's going to be that might be tall fescue or fescue. But with these, the lighter blue color, and again, those 3 to 4 main ribs, that is not scientific. That's just something that an old geezer told me when I was learning my different weeds. But that's something with the Nimblewill. And then the seed heads are spikes or awns, excuse me. So they're going to grow sort of up like that. And then let's see. So here you have the patches. If you guys notice this, it is going to be, like I said, very prominent this time of year because it is that brown color during the spring green up. So our turf is loving this weather right now. Even though we're having kind of the hot, cold spells, we have plenty of moisture. So it's chugging away just fine. But the Nimblewill is kind of slow to recover in the green up. The problem with this is if you do have a Nimblewill issue, if it's the size of a baseball this year, if the patch is the size of a baseball this year, next year is probably going to be the size of a volleyball or a basketball. Year after that, hula hoop. The most difficult thing about Nimblewill is, as you can see, it is a grass species. It is a cool season grass. So it is very difficult to control a cool season grass that's a weed in a cool season grass that is desired. Here we've got Nimblewill as the drought tolerant variety. So here Nimblewill is growing fine in the summertime. And then I don't know if this is annual rye or perennial or something, but whatever happened here is not good. But yeah, Nimblewill does like the heat. And here you can kind of see this darker green area here, and then this lighter blue area is going to be the bluish gray color is going to be the Nimblewill. So easy to see at a distance. Here we have, again, cultural, not much because once it invades, it's kind of aggressive. It does have a very touchy chemical control to it. So mesotrione, which is usually labeled for crabgrass, can be used for selective control on cool season turfs. What's going to happen is if you do spray this product on the Nimblewill, it will actually bleach the leaves and turn it white. So you will have to make a couple applications because it's not necessarily controlling the plant, but it's bleaching them so that they can't photosynthesize. All right. So that's Nimblewill. Not a fun one, but it's there. So I showed this to a master gardener class in Allen County. And as soon as we talked about it, they're like, oh yeah, they had seen that. So this is a good time of year to discuss that.
Yep. Anyone else have any other questions? I know we've had a lot of good questions here today, so.
I'm trying to see. And yeah,
Plantain?
oh yeah, that is a good one. Plantain, plantain. You guys can say it however you want. Let's get back here. There are 2 main kinds. We've got our buckhorn plantain and our common. Oh no, that's not right. Buckhorn plantain and our broadleaf plantain. For all intents and purposes, they are pretty much the same plants. The leaf shape is just a little different, and the seed heads are a little different too. But these guys are wonderful during the drought. So as our turf goes dormant in the hot summer months, these guys do just fine. If we think of the cactus has a very waxy covering to preserve water. These have very waxy leaves to preserve water. So they do just fine with those dog days of summer during August. Here you have the seed head, these nice stems, very unsightly. Imagine in the summer, we're not mowing as much because the turf is going dormant, but these guys are not. They are putting on the seed, so very unsightly. In terms of, again, once we get into the high summer, it's going to be kind of an eyesore. Let's scroll down. So here you just have different stages of growth. Here are some younger plants. Here's an older, more mature plant. Again, rosette growth. It's going to grow more out. Basically, if you can take seed, it's going to come up and tower over the turf and just shade everything out underneath it. These crowns are very hardy. So, you know, if you're going to use a chemical to remove them, make sure you're doing that in the fall. That's going to give you your best control. Here we have a young seed head emerging. Plantain, you know, some of them will have this sort of reddish color on the interior. Some people call this a weed. Some people do not. This is just kind of a side story. I was giving a presentation at our conference back when I was in grad school, and I had two individuals from, it was either Finland or Switzerland, come up and they say, we love this stuff. And so what they do is they actually plant this in their gardens, and they will use the seeds sort of as a heal-all. So they'll make a sort of a paste out of it. And then, you know, they use it like aloe, something like that. But yeah, these are some of the weeds that, again, they're very difficult to kill, but there are different, there has been different research on what you can use. 2,4-D is a possibility, but then triclopure, that is going to be something that works a little bit better with that plant biology. The turf lawn ester, that will do a good job on these, what we consider hard to control weeds.
All right, so another question here is, how do you control moss in the lawn?
Yep, if you have moss, that's an indicator weed that you have a shady area. I jokingly say this, if you don't want moss, you can cut down all your trees and let all the light in. I'm not suggesting that. That's just one of those things where moss just means you do have moisture, you do have shade. Some things you can do, not cut down your tree, but limit up a little bit, because basically what you're trying to do is, if you want to keep that tree, you're limiting it up so that, one, you get good airflow. Airflow is going to be key, and then a little more sunlight. The other thing that you can do, actually, we can I think moss has a profile here. The other thing you can do is a cultural practice, which is finding a shade tolerant turf seed. So long story short, if you plant a fine leaf fescue, that's going to do better in the shade than a sun loving group like the Kentucky bluegrass. I thought we had moss on here somewhere. But those are a couple things you can do. Some people will rake it up. I guess we don't. But yeah, that's the biggest thing, is making sure you have better airflow and better light. Here's the question. Recommending weed control with direct spray on each weed group versus general lawn application. Great question. As an extension educator, it depends. If you have, let's say, a large population of dandelions that you want to get rid of, a broadcast application is great. But if you only have 3 or 4 dandelions, you might just say, hey, I'll go out and I will spot spray. Regardless of what you decide to do in your lawn, if you do a broadcast spray, there's going to be regulations on that methodology on the label. If you're doing a spot spray, there's going to be a different set of rules. So, you know, whatever you decide, make sure you're following that label. Let's see. So yeah, Jessica, one of our educators here, she mentions, you know, good for bee stings and other stuff. Again, kind of like a heal-all. Let's see. Did I miss any questions? I kind of was scrolling through.
I think you've covered all the questions that have been in the chat so far.
Which, again, I know we kind of went off script today. Hopefully, you know, we'll get something put together, but this was kind of the purpose of these talks, was just to kind of get the information out there. So again, I can stay around for a little longer. If people want to come through, I can actually, I'm going to put my email, if I can get the chat box to work. I'll put my email in the chat box. Because I'm going to do my shameless plug for extension. There should be an Ag and Natural Resources educator in everyone's county in Indiana. My background is in turf, so I'm happy to help my coworkers in other counties with turf problems. So that's kind of how we use that networking. I mentioned I'm not very good at bird identification, but I know Jessica is, so I might call her with a question. So that's kind of how we work, how we figure out, what we can do with our resources. Because at the end of the day, you can always try to Google something, but the information, you're doing a pretty heavy gamble on that one. So again, with extension, a lot of stuff that we say, maybe not the answer you want, but it is an answer that we have to give because it's research based. I actually did, and then this is kind of long story short, in my research, I spent 3 years growing dandelions in a greenhouse so that I could tell individuals, if you are going to use the 2,4-D amine spray, and if you're using water, groundwater from a well or from the city in Indiana, you probably have hard water. You need to treat that water with ammonium sulfate to make the herbicide work better. Okay, so I just said that in 15 seconds, whatever. That was 3 years of research right there that we did. So again, everything has quite a bit of background to it. And that's where we try to, digest the research. I know you guys don't want to read a 47-page document with graphs and statistics and stuff. Instead, as an educator, extension educator, we can just say, hey, if you're having problems with your weeds, let's check your water and what you're spraying and make sure we're doing the right thing. So.
Well, I want to take a moment and say thank you to everyone who stayed with us here today. Like we said, today did not go as planned at all, but I still think we were able to bring some really, really relative information to you guys. We were able to understand or help you guys understand some of the problems and issues that you're having in your yard. And you know what? That's what we're here for on a daily basis. As Jeff said, we are located in every single county here in Indiana, and we're here to help you. So feel free to reach out to us. I'm in Howard County. Jeff is in Wabash County. Jessica is over in Grant, but we've got resources in every county. So, and it's not just lawns. We've got field crops. We've got a lot of other issues or a lot of other topics as well that we can help you with. So, so with that, we'll just want to say thank you, everyone.
And yeah, I can stay on for a little bit longer. There was a question here. Where did it go? Dandelions bringing nutrients to the surface. I don't know. Dandelions, I see them more as they steal water and resources from the turf. I don't know about bringing nutrients. I don't know. Is it Mike? Did you want to expound on that if you're still here? No worries if not. All right. And then, yeah, feel free to email. I'm going to stop the recording. And then, yeah, I'll figure out what the heck happened. I hope I didn't send our speaker the